Hello Nigerians, we have a breaking news and this is very serious. Right now as we speak, the fight over fuel subsidy, the same fight that shaped the 2023 election, is back on the table. And this time, it is coming from a man who once stood shoulder to shoulder with President Tinubu in promising to kill that subsidy for good. I am asking you, please stay with me till the very end of this report, because what I am about to unpack for you is not just politics as usual. It touches your pocket. It touches the price of fuel at the filling station. It touches the price of garri, of transport, of everything you buy with your hard-earned naira. This is not a story you want to catch in bits and pieces on social media. You want the full picture. This story involves former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, the ADC presidential candidate for 2027, and it involves the presidency itself, including the FCT Minister Nyesom Wike, and now, just today, the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris. And it is landing at a very sensitive moment, barely months to the 2027 general election, at a time when Nigerians are still groaning under the weight of high fuel prices and a tough economy. Before I go further, let me quickly say this. If you are new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button, tap the like, and turn on your notification bell. We bring you the news the way it actually happened. No sentiment, no exaggeration, just the facts as they stand. And where it is opinion, we will tell you clearly that it is opinion. That is how Nigerian News Online has always done it, and that is how we will continue. Now, back to the news. Let us start from the very beginning of this latest round, because the documentary trail here is important. On the 20th of August 2026, Atiku Abubakar went on a Facebook Live session and made a declaration that immediately set political Nigeria on fire. He said, and I am summarizing his own words here, that if he wins the 2027 presidential election, he will restore Nigeria's petrol subsidy. He told Nigerians plainly that he did not originally oppose the removal of the subsidy back in 2023, but that his position has since changed because, in his words, he wants to know where the money saved from subsidy removal has actually gone. That is the spark. One social media broadcast, and within days, the presidency, the Federal Capital Territory Minister, and now a sitting cabinet minister have all weighed in. Let me give you the facts first. What is documented? What is on record? Before we get into who is throwing punches at who. Fact number one, the Petroleum Industry Act, the PIA, which was signed into law in 2021, had already scheduled the removal of petrol subsidy to take effect by the end of June 2023. That is written into the law itself. It was not a spontaneous decision. Fact number two, President Bola Tinubu, during his inauguration speech on the 29th of May 2023 at Eagle Square, announced that subsidy was gone. He effectively moved the date forward by a few weeks from what the PIA had already scheduled. Fact number three, back in the 2023 campaign season, it is on record that Atiku Abubakar, President Tinubu, and the Labour Party's Peter Obi all promised as candidates that they would remove the fuel subsidy if elected. All three men, at different points, described the old subsidy regime as corrupt and unsustainable. So, here is the documented shift. The same man who campaigned on ending subsidy in 2023 is now, in 2026, campaigning on bringing it back with elections around the corner in 2027. That contradiction, that timeline, is exactly what the presidency has seized on. On the 20th of August, the Special Advisor to the President on Information and Strategy, Bayo Onanuga, released a statement titled Restoring Petrol Subsidies, Atiku's Vote Face and Desperation for Power. In it, the presidency accused Atiku of abandoning his own economic doctrine and disputed his claim that a massive multi-trillion naira windfall exists from the subsidy savings. Now, let us bring in the next voice, and this one did not hold back at all. On the 21st of August, speaking in Abuja during an inspection of infrastructure projects in the Federal Capital Territory, FCT Minister Nyesom Wike went after Atiku directly. He questioned Atiku's consistency, asking pointedly whether the former vice president was now going back on what he himself had once called a fraud. Wike described Atiku quite bluntly as a voodoo economist. But beyond the name-calling, Wike raised a substantive economic argument, and this is where you, as a viewer, should pay close attention. He argued that restoring a government-controlled subsidy would run directly against the direction the Petroleum Industry Act was designed to take the country, toward a commercially driven, competitive downstream petroleum market, not one propped up by state price controls. He warned that reintroducing subsidy could create what he called regulatory uncertainty, weaken investor confidence in Nigeria's oil and gas sector, and bring back the very distortions the reforms were meant to eliminate. That is the core of Wike's position, not just insult, but a genuine policy warning. Whether you agree with his tone or not, that argument about investor confidence and regulatory uncertainty weaken investor confidence in Nigeria's oil and gas sector and bring back the very distortions the reforms were meant to eliminate. That is the core of Wike's position, not just insult, but a genuine policy warning. Whether you agree with his tone or not, that argument about investor confidence and regulatory uncertainty is one economists across the political divide have raised before, going back years whenever subsidy comes up for debate. It is worth remembering that context as this story develops. It did not stop at Wike. President Tinubu himself weighed in personally. Speaking at the State House in Abuja while receiving Governor Ademola Adeleke of Osun State in audience, Tinubu addressed Atiku's subsidy pledge head-on. He told those present that Atiku's plan to bring back fuel subsidy showed a lack of understanding of governance and economic management. It was a direct, presidential-level rebuke, not delivered through a spokesperson this time, but from the president's own mouth in a public setting with a sitting governor beside him. Think about that for a moment. It is not every day that a sitting president personally responds to a campaign promise from an opposition candidate more than a year before the actual election. That in itself tells you how sensitive this subsidy question still is to this administration, because subsidy removal has been positioned as the flagship defining reform of the Tinubu presidency. Any suggestion of reversing it touches the very foundation of how this government wants to be remembered. On the other side, Atiku's camp has continued to insist that questioning where the subsidy savings went is a legitimate, reasonable demand, not economic illiteracy. That is the allegation versus allegation terrain we are now standing on, and we will get into both sides fully as we go. Now, let us move to the 23rd of August, because Atiku's team did not stay quiet. Through his senior special assistant on public communication, Frank Shaibu, Atiku responded on that Sunday with a defiant message. He said, and this is close to his exact phrasing, that even 100 million Tinubus could not stop him from restoring a targeted subsidy to protect Nigerians from hardship. Strong words, deliberately combative, clearly meant to show that the criticism from the presidency and from Wike had not moved him 1 inch. Shaibu went further, accusing the Tinubu administration of what he called one of the biggest economic frauds in Nigeria's recent history, arguing that while the government tells Nigerians subsidy is gone, it continues to grant tax credits and fiscal incentives to petroleum industry investors. In Atiku's camp's telling, ordinary Nigerians are being asked to bear the full weight of market pricing, while big oil and gas investors are still being shielded through government incentives. This is where we must be very careful, and this is exactly the kind of moment where we separate fact from allegation. That subsidy was removed for consumers at the pump, that is documented fact. That fiscal incentives exist for petroleum investors under Nigerian law, that is also broadly true. Incentives for upstream and midstream investment do exist under the PIA framework. But whether that amounts to fraud, whether it is comparable to consumer subsidy, whether the scale alleged is accurate, that remains Atiku's camp's characterization, their political argument, not an independently verified figure.
And this brings us to the numbers. Because in Nigerian politics, when the naira figures start flying, you know the fight has gotten serious. Atiku's camp pointed to what they described as NNPC's own audited accounts, citing a figure running into trillions of naira, which they say represents subsidy-related costs still sitting unresolved in the National Oil Company's books. On the other side, the presidency, through Bayo Onanuga's statement, flatly rejected Atiku's earlier claim of a roughly 30 trillion naira subsidy windfall or savings, saying no such figure exists anywhere except, in Onanuga's words, in his imagination. So here is what we know for certain Nigerians. NNPC has, in the past, disclosed under-recovery costs, essentially situations where it sold petrol below the price it imported it for, absorbing the difference itself rather than the Treasury directly billing citizens. That mechanism is documented and has been reported before. What is not settled, what remains contested between these two camps, is the exact scale of savings from subsidy removal, where those funds have gone, and whether Atiku's specific trillion naira figures are accurate. This is precisely why, dear viewer, you should treat both sides' numbers with healthy skepticism until there is an independent, verifiable audit that both camps can agree reflects reality. Politicians quoting big numbers at each other is not the same thing as verified public accounting.
Now we come to today, the 24th of August 2026, and this is really the headline of our story. Atiku Abubakar doubled down again on his subsidy plan, and this time his campaign gave us more detail on what exactly he is proposing. He accused President Tinubu of running what he called two economies inside one country, a market-driven economy imposed on ordinary households, while investors in the petroleum industry continue to enjoy fiscal protections and incentives designed to reduce their risk. In a statement, Atiku was quoted making the point that if government can protect a multi-billion-dollar oil investment from risk, it makes no sense to call it bad economics to protect the Nigerian worker from crushing hardship. But here is the important nuance Nigerians need to hear clearly. Atiku's campaign insists this is not a return to the old, opaque, corruption-ridden subsidy system of the past. What they are proposing, according to the statement, is a targeted, capped, transparently budgeted and independently audited intervention, one with a clearly defined exit mechanism, meaning it would not run forever without review. Alongside that, they say it would come with accelerated domestic refining capacity, more competition in the downstream sector, investment in mass transportation, and measures aimed at restoring household purchasing power. So this is not, on paper at least, a promise to simply reopen the old subsidy tap. It is a promise of a redesigned, smaller, monitored version. Whether that is achievable in practice is of course a separate question entirely.
And Atiku is not standing alone, nor is he without critics from within the same opposition space. Let me bring you a few of the other voices that have entered this conversation. Some political figures aligned with opposition circles have described Atiku's proposal as troubling and suspicious, questioning the timing and sincerity behind such a dramatic reversal so close to an election cycle. Others have gone further, describing Atiku as, in effect, the father of subsidy removal himself, pointing out that he was among the earliest and loudest voices calling for its elimination and calling this sudden about-turn dishonest, politically convenient rather than principled. On another front, we have also heard from voices like former Cross River Governor Donald Duke, who has used this moment to canvass for what he calls an economic reset, arguing that current policies are worsening hardship for ordinary Nigerians, regardless of whichever specific subsidy formula is eventually adopted. What this tells you, Nigerians, is that this is not simply a clean, two-sided fight between Atiku and the presidency. There are cracks and disagreements, even within the opposition camp, about whether restoring subsidy in any form is the right economic direction for the country. That is important context as we head toward 2027, because it shows this debate is not settled even among those who oppose the current administration. And now, the latest development, which is really what is driving today's headlines
also on this Monday, the 24th of August. The Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, published an op-ed carrying the title, "Restoring Fuel Subsidy Will Reverse Nigeria's Economic Gains." In that piece, Minister Idris laid out what he described as the fiscal benefits achieved since subsidy removal, and he warned that reversing course would recreate the very economic conditions Nigeria was trying to escape from. Specifically, he warned that restoring subsidy would almost instantly return the country to conditions similar to what Nigeria experienced back in 2022, recreating fiscal pressures, market distortions, fuel scarcity, and renewed incentives for arbitrage, meaning people exploiting price differences by smuggling or hoarding fuel. Idris framed this as coming amid renewed calls, in his words, from some quarters for subsidy to return, with proponents arguing it would cushion Nigerians from high fuel costs and the rising cost of living. But his position, clearly and firmly stated, is that returning to the old regime would undermine the fiscal gains made since 2023 and expose the country once again to the same structural problems that made the original policy unsustainable in the first place. That is the government's official, on-record economic argument published today in direct response to Atiku's renewed push. And with that, Nigerians, we now have both sides fully on record.
Let me now pause and do what we always try to do on this channel. Separate what is confirmed fact from what remains political claim. Here is what we know for certain. Atiku Abubakar has publicly and repeatedly across the 20th, 23rd and 24th of August pledged to restore a form of petrol subsidy if elected in 2027. The Presidency, through Bayo Onanuga, Nyesom Wike, and President Tinubu himself, has publicly and repeatedly rejected that plan. The Information Minister has published an official op-ed today warning against it. These are all documented, on-record positions, not rumor, not speculation. Here is what remains allegation or contested claim. Whether the government's fiscal incentives to oil investors amount to a second subsidy, as Atiku's camp alleges, that is a political characterization, not an independently confirmed accounting fact. Whether Atiku's proposed, targeted, capped, and audited subsidy is genuinely different from the old system, or whether it would, in practice, balloon the same way previous subsidy regimes did, that is unknown and untested because he is not yet in office to implement it. And whether Atiku's earlier support for subsidy removal in 2023 was principled and has now genuinely changed due to new evidence, or whether it is, as his critics allege, purely a politically convenient reversal ahead of election season, that too remains a matter of interpretation, not settled fact. Nigerians, this distinction matters. Do not let anyone on either side sell you their allegation dressed up as confirmed fact.
Let me now give you, as fairly as I can, the strongest version of each side's argument, because that is the only way you can judge this for yourself. The strongest case for Atiku's position goes like this. Nigerians have endured extremely painful fuel prices since 2023, with knock-on effects on transport costs, food prices, and general cost of living. If government can extend fiscal protection and incentives to multinational oil investors to reduce their risk, it is not unreasonable to ask why a smaller, targeted, tightly monitored subsidy cannot exist to protect the most vulnerable households, provided it comes with strict accountability and a clear exit plan. Now, the strongest case for the government's position. Nigeria spent years, arguably decades, pouring trillions of naira into an opaque subsidy system that was repeatedly exploited through smuggling, round-tripping, and inflated claims with very little transparency about where the money truly went. The Petroleum Industry Act was specifically designed to end that era and build a competitive, investor-friendly downstream market. Reintroducing any form of subsidy, even a targeted one, risks reopening the same avenues for abuse, discouraging the private refining investment, including new domestic refining capacity that the country has spent years trying to attract, and returning Nigeria to the fiscal fragility that made the old system collapse in the first place. Both arguments have real weight. Neither side has, at this point, offered fully independent, third-party verified numbers to settle the debate definitively. But let us bring this back down to earth. Because at the end of the day, this debate is not really about Atiku or Tinubu or Wike. It is about you, the ordinary Nigerian, standing in a fuel queue, checking the price board before you fill your tank, or counting how much of your salary disappears into transport fare every single week. If subsidy stays fully removed, as it is now, the argument from government is that market forces, competition, and new domestic refining, including capacity from local refineries, will eventually stabilize and even bring down prices while freeing up government revenue for infrastructure, healthcare, and education. That is the promise, though many Nigerians will tell you they are still waiting to feel that relief in their daily lives. If a targeted subsidy returns, as Atiku proposes, the promise is more immediate relief at the pump for ordinary households, alongside safeguards meant to prevent the corruption of the past. But the risk, as critics point out, is that once any subsidy mechanism reopens, history in Nigeria has shown it is very difficult to keep it small, transparent, and temporary. Either way, Nigerians, you are the ones who will live with whichever direction wins this argument, through your transport fares, your market prices, and your household budget. That is why this is not just a political story, it is your story too. Now, let me give my honest take briefly as we close out this report. Whichever side of this debate you fall on, what Nigerians deserve more than any subsidy formula is transparency. If subsidy savings exist, show Nigerians exactly where every naira went in verifiable published detail. If a new targeted subsidy is ever proposed, let its design, its cap, its audit process, and its exit plan be published openly before implementation, not after. Due process and open accounting should not be a luxury in this conversation. They should be the starting point. Here is what this story leaves unanswered, and what you should watch for going forward. Will Atiku's campaign release a detailed, costed policy document explaining exactly how a targeted and capped subsidy would be funded and monitored? Will the presidency ever publish a full, independent breakdown of subsidy savings since 2023, showing precisely where those funds were allocated? Will Wike's warning about investor confidence be tested by any actual shift in foreign investment sentiment as this political battle continues? And will other opposition figures, some of whom have already criticized Atiku's move, eventually rally behind him, or will this crack the opposition further ahead of 2027? Those are the threads we will be pulling on in the weeks ahead.
Nigerians, this is a conversation that will not end today, and it will not end this week. It touches the price of fuel, the price of food, and the direction of an economy that every one of us depends on. So I want you to do something simple for me. Drop your honest thoughts in the comment section. Tell me which side of this subsidy argument makes more sense to you. And if this report helped you understand this story properly, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you do not miss the next update as this story develops. From all of us here, standing firmly on the side of facts, this has been another breaking report from Niger News Online. Stay informed, stay alert, and above all, stay with us, because we will keep bringing you this story until Nigerians finally get the full truth. Until next time, this is your uncle signing off. Take care of yourselves and take care of one another.